The Washington Commanders may have lost more than just the game on Sunday. They may have also lost 3 key offensive players who would be critical to helping them snap this 3-game losing streak. That and more coming up on today's episode of Locked On Commanders.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, David Harrison, covering the Washington Commanders for Sports Illustrated's CommanderGameDay.com, also helping out with WUSA9.com's local coverage of the team this season. And of course, I'm here with you every Monday through Friday. I appreciate you coming through today. If you're an everydayer, I appreciate you coming through every single day. Locked On Commanders is your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders. And if you haven't already, please click that subscribe button or follow button or whatever it is for free on YouTube or wherever you are listening to today's episode, where we are going to give an update on the divisional and playoff standings for the Washington Commanders. We're going to talk about Frankie Luvu, Benjamin St-Juste, and more things that we want to see continue forward with the Washington Commanders, things we want to leave behind as we get back to our after-action review episodes. But we're going to kick it all off talking about injury updates. Dan Quinn, head coach of the Commanders, was able to meet with running back Austin Ekeler following his concussion on Sunday night. So we'll dive into all of that and what it means for the week moving forward against the Tennessee Titans. Of course, you can start this season with a big return on FanDuel, and today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. New customers place a $5 bet, and you get started with $150 in bonus bets if that $5 bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com to get started today. The Washington Commanders certainly lost to the Dallas Cowboys, but they may have lost more than just that game. They may have lost 3 key players on offense that they'll need to either get back healthy or find replacements for to stop the 3-game losing streak this weekend at home against the Tennessee Titans. Those players, of course, running back Austin Ekeler, who suffered a concussion near the end of the game against the Dallas Cowboys, running back Brian Robinson Jr., who suffered an ankle injury, and offensive tackle Andrew Wiley, who also suffered a concussion against the Cowboys on Sunday. Now, we're going to start off with Austin Ekeler because clearly the most concerning of the injuries. You never like to see a player go down in the fashion that Austin Ekeler went down. You never like to see a player go down, period. But especially when a guy goes down the way that Austin Ekeler did, it gives you extra concern. And certainly, there was a moment in the press box where everybody was just quiet. The stadium was just quiet. It was really just kind of one of those moments where everybody, no matter what jersey you were wearing, no matter what outlet you were writing from or what city you were covering the game from, I think everybody had equal amounts of concern for Austin. Now, fortunately, he was able to get up and walk off the sideline. However, watching him walk off the sideline certainly was not walking under his own power, was being helped and held up by 2 trainers on either side of him. And, just walking into the tunnel and off of the field to get further evaluation, just clearly not in a good place. Dan Quinn did tell us on Monday that he was able to visit with Austin Ekeler, said that all the scans came back. They did send him to the hospital. We were told Sunday night that it was out of an abundance of caution, which is good. But Dan Quinn did say that all the scans that they did at the hospital and all the further evaluations came back good. So obviously a concussion, right? But nothing that, would be more than that or worse than that. So that's good. He did say Austin Ekeler was sore, is going to be in concussion protocol, and admitted that he himself, as a coach in this game, it was a scary moment when you see concussions like that. Honestly, it reminded me a lot of Tua Tagovailoa. Fortunately for me, I guess, I've never had to be in person or on ground when Tua Tagovailoa suffered one of his multiple concussions at this point. But, you just kind of go back to the moments when it happens and you see, players, competitors, fans, opposing fans, everybody just kind of has concern for the human that's underneath the helmet and not just the player and not just the status of the game. So really wishing well to Austin Ekeler, who said it in our post-game episode, but I just want to reiterate it as well. I'm really looking forward to seeing him back in the locker room, back to getting to doing what he wants to do, if that's what he chooses to continue to do. So Austin Ekeler, the person, the health, it's not good, obviously, but, it could have been worse is basically kind of the mantra there. And there's a process, undergoing to get him back and available, and that's the concussion protocol. And this is kind of the time where concussion protocols come into question. I had quite a few insiders ask me, what is concussion protocol? We hear concussion protocol all the time, but a lot of fans don't necessarily know what that really means. So concussion protocol is broken into 5 phases, and the 5th phase you're actually cleared from concussion protocol and you can return to action. But it all starts obviously with getting to phase 1. So Austin Ekeler right now is basically trying to clear phase 1, which includes symptom limited activity. So while he has symptoms, or while he's trying to clear symptoms, he's only going to be allowed to do any type of light aerobic activity, riding a stationary bike, things like that. He's not going to be able to run. He's not going to be able to go run routes or carry a ball through a pad machine or anything like that. It's going to be light aerobic activity. Phase 2 involves aerobic exercise, more than 20 minutes of strenuous activity. So that's where you can potentially get to, heavier resistance levels or running, things like that. Phase 3, you get to football exercises, cuts, running routes, stuff like that. Again, it's just the exercise portion of it. There's no contact, nothing like that. Then you get to phase 4, club-based non-contact training drills. So now you can participate in position group drills, participate in taking handoffs, catching screens, things like that, but he won't be able to receive contact during practice from his teammates. Phase 5 is full football activity, and that's the phase where you get cleared. Now, you've got to be able to do the activity in that phase without having a return of symptoms, right? So you've got to be able to do, for example, phase 2 aerobic exercise. You've got to be able to do more than 20 minutes of strenuous activity and exercise without the symptoms returning during or in the day, the 24 hours or so after the activity was done, in order to clear to the next phase. And so you hear the 5 phases, right? Like it's Tuesday now, and it's you're if you count today, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you're 6 days to clear 5 phases. It's typically why when you hear somebody got a concussion, they're probably going to miss that next game. It's typically pretty hard to clear concussion protocol fully in the span of one game to the next, which is why when New York Giants running back Tyrone Tracy Jr. suffered a concussion on Monday Night Football and then was able to return for Sunday against the Commanders, it was a little, I'll say, astounding, I guess, is the best way to put that. So, it's up to the player to definitely communicate clearly. There are obviously some signs and symptoms that can be measured, but hopefully Austin Ekeler, and if I don't know Austin Ekeler as much as obviously some people do, but if I know Austin Ekeler at all, I don't think Austin is the type of guy to lie through his tests to try to get on the field before he should be on the field. He seems to be a guy who is in pretty control of his future, and also concerned about having control of his future. So I don't think Austin is going to be cutting any corners here, and nor should he. And hopefully the team, if they get any inkling that he's just trying to play the warrior role, tells him, hey, dude, like, you need to protect yourself. You need to protect your future and your livelihood. Running back Brian Robinson Jr., a right ankle injury. And man, that right leg just continues to go through it. The knee injury he had earlier in the season that cost him the Baltimore Ravens game was on his right knee. The hamstring injury was a right hamstring, and now he's got a right ankle injury. Dan Quinn said he received treatment on the right ankle on Monday, and the team is just going to have to see how it goes moving into the week. The fact that it tightened up as much as it did to the point where he wasn't able to play in the second half against the Dallas Cowboys certainly is not promising, but it's certainly not a expect him to not be there this weekend against the Titans type of situation. Although with the bye week coming up, it wouldn't necessarily be the worst thing for Brian Robinson to sit. And you would like to believe that his team could beat the Titans even without him. However, when you're coming off of a 3-game losing streak, you kind of start to tend to not lean towards those types of inklings, right? Offensive tackle Andrew Wiley also in the concussion protocol. I didn't see exactly what happened, but I know other people were saying that it looked like he laid a block on Micah Parsons and basically suffered the concussion there. It doesn't really matter when he suffered the concussion. The good news with Andrew Wiley is when he walked off the field with the independent neurological specialist, he walked off the field, wasn't being helped off, anything like that. Certainly any concussion is not a good thing, but it does open up the question to whether or not Washington's going to host Tennessee without possibly their top 2 running backs, their kick returner, and their starting right tackle. Again, concussions, you don't typically see a player return the next week after a concussion. So Andrew Wiley, Austin Ekeler, certainly trending early this week towards not being available, which means that Cornelius Lucas or Brandon Coleman would likely kick over to right tackle. The good news is Lucas is back and healthy. If you go to training camp, it's most likely Brandon Coleman plays right tackle. Cornelius plays left tackle. However, Brandon Coleman, Dan Quinn said, is coming off his best game as a left tackle. So perhaps he keeps him there and moves Lucas to the right tackle position. That's all something that's got to get washed out in the course of the week. The bad news here for the running back group is if you don't have B-Rob and you don't have Austin Ekeler, which I don't expect you to see Austin Ekeler till after the bye, Jeremy McNichols is your only running back on the active roster who is also healthy. On the practice squad, you have Michael Wiley. Michael Wiley, not a power presence, And the only other power back you could potentially have would be Chris Rodriguez Jr. if he returns to the team on the practice squad, but you can't elevate him from the practice squad because those elevations, to my understanding, I should say, don't reset once you release him and bring him back to the practice squad. So you'd have to put Chris Rodriguez back on the active roster to use him against the Tennessee Titans and potentially have a running back room of Jeremy McNichols, Chris Rodriguez Jr., and Michael Wiley. But if you do that, you've got to make room for him on the active roster, which means someone's either got to go on IR or someone's got to get released. And looking at the degree of concussion that Austin Ekeler may have sustained, looking at the Tua Tagovailoa comparisons, there is a potential, I believe, that Austin Ekeler goes on IR, and that then creates room for Chris Rodriguez to return to the active roster. What's clear, outside of speculation, Washington definitely has some roster things they've got to deal with this week, and then you can look for Tuesday afternoon probably for some of those moves to start being made as the team gets ready to return to practice and to work on Wednesday. If the Commanders are going to stop this losing streak this weekend against the Titans, they're going to need more Frankie Luvus on the field. That's next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Commanders is brought to you in part by Skylight Frames. Are you missing someone that doesn't live close enough for you to see them every single day and wish there was an easy way for you to do so? Well, this holiday season, you can give yourself or others the gift of memories because we've got the perfect gift for you. Skylight Frame is the touchscreen digital photo frame your whole family is going to love. You can upload thousands of photos with your phone and watch them appear on the frame in seconds. It's so easy to use. It takes less than 60 seconds to set it up. And one of the coolest features is its seamless sharing, where you can invite friends and family to easily share photos via the free Skylight mobile app or email with no account or subscription required. And the touchscreen is a game changer compared to other digital frames. Swipe through photos, tap to see the new photos sent, and tap the heart button to say thank you to the sender. And now a special limited time offer for our listeners. Get $20 off your purchase of a Skylight frame when you go to skylightframe.com/NFL. That's SKYLIGHTFRAME.com/NFL. Get $20 off your purchase now at skylightframe.com/NFL. Today's episode of Locked On Commanders also brought to you in part by FanDuel, and FanDuel wants you to get ready to take advantage of all the Thanksgiving NFL action and the weekend's NFL action going on with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And right now, new customers, you can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet wins. With the FanDuel app, you get everything you need to place your live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, you can view the play-by-play, and so much more on the same exact page where you can then place your bets. And of course, you can still make your bets before the game. Like maybe you want to take the Washington Commanders, who are 5.5-point favorites at home against the Tennessee Titans this weekend. Of course, maybe given the current trend, you want to stay away from that for a little bit, or just take the Washington Commanders straight up and not have to worry about how many points they win by, just whether or not they actually get the win. Whatever it is you want to bet on, visit FanDuel.com to join today. You can start with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the National Football League. If the Commanders are going to stop their losing streak at 3 and get a win against the Tennessee Titans this weekend, they're going to need a lot more of Frankie Luvu and a lot more Frankie Luvus on the field. We're going to get back to our after-action reviews here now that we're back to more of a regular schedule, no more condensed weeks and all this other craziness going on. What was supposed to happen this last Sunday, the Commanders were supposed to win by 10.5 points. That was the spread by the time kickoff came around. What actually happened is the Dallas Cowboys won by 8 points. And usually we get through here, we go our stash and our trash. We got 3 things we want to sustain moving forward. That's our stash. 3 things we want to get rid of moving forward. That's our trash. But I thought we're going to change it up a little bit. We're going to actually kind of specify where these 3 sustains and these 3 improves come from. And I want to go with a player, I want to go with a play, and I want to go with a team element here. And that team element is kind of a wild card because it could be a specific player, but what his impact was or wasn't potentially on the team as well. So team's going to be a little bit of a wild card, but that's how we're going to do this moving forward. Our players stash from week 12's loss against the Dallas Cowboys. It's got to be linebacker Frankie Luvu. Look, Greg Olsen during the broadcast copy of the game called Luvu the most impactful new addition outside of Jayden Daniels. And I just got to say, I got to agree with him hands down. Now, only Bobby Wagner has played more snaps than Frankie Luvu has on the defense this year, but Frankie Luvu is 3rd on the team in tackles behind Wagner and safety Jeremy Chin. He's 2nd in tackles for losses behind Dante Fowler Jr., linebacker. He's second in quarterback hits behind defensive end Dorrance Armstrong Jr., and he's second in sacks behind Fowler as well. So Frankie Luvu, top 2 or 3 in every critical defensive category you can have for this Washington Commanders defense. Among NFL linebackers as a whole, Frankie Luvu 8th among them in sacks this season. He brings physicality, he brings energy, and he brings leadership. And if you've been listening to Dan Quinn talk, you already know physicality, energy, those are 2 of the most critical things to being a Commander. Frankie Luvu brings those in droves, and then he also brings leadership. He brings the guys together. He encourages them. He shows them by his own play on the field, which I've always told you, leading through by example is the minimum of any leader. He does that in droves, and he does even more to bring these guys together. So Frankie Luvu is certainly a player that you want to keep moving forward from week 12 to week 13 and week forever, to be quite honest with you. And the more Frankie Luvus this team can get, the better off they'll be. You heard Dan Quinn talk on Monday, if you call it his Zoom press conference, about needing to return to some of that energy, some of that physicality that they had in the first 9 weeks where they started 7-2. So we'll see if that message gets through, and we'll see if guys like Frankie Luvu can bring that out of those guys even more than he has already. The play that we want to stash, the 86-yard touchdown pass from Jayden Daniels to Terry McLaurin, of course, right? Came on a 1st and 10 at the Washington 14, Commanders trailing by 7 at the time in the waning moments of the game. 11 personnel, quads formation with 3 receivers and a running back to the right side, which was also the boundary side of the formation, and the tight end was in a reduced split on the field side, left side of the formation. Now, boundary side means the side with the shortest distance between the ball, where the ball is marked, and the sideline or on the field opposite of it. And the boundary side, or the field side rather, is the side of the field where from the ball to the sideline has the most amount of space. So when we're talking about these things, you understand 11 personnel, 1 running back, 1 tight end. The running back was Austin Ekeler, who was on the 4 receiver side, along with Terry McLaurin, Noah Brown, and Luke McCaffrey. And then the 1 tight end was Zach Ertz, who stood up detached from the line of scrimmage. So he was not down on the, not in the 3-point stance, not attached to the line of scrimmage, but detached from the line of scrimmage. However, he wasn't out wide. He was still close to the line of scrimmage, putting him in a reduced split. So he's split. He's just not wide. Imagine him basically in the slot, but there's no outside receiver outside of him. The Dallas Cowboys countered with 4 guys on the line of scrimmage. The rest of the defense kind of peppered across the field, clearly in a zone look. They did not even come close to trying to match and man to disguise it. 5 defenders are 12 or more yards off the line of scrimmage. Clearly, again, the Cowboys trying to prevent anything deep from getting over their heads. The rest of the defense is peppered across the field. And they look like they're basically in cover 4 pre-snap. At the snap, however, they fall into cover 3. Brown and McCaffrey run deep routes, clearing out the top coverage of the Dallas Cowboys defense as they try to keep everything in front of them, while McLaurin runs a slot fade going down the right side right sideline. Underneath, Ekeler and Ertz are running parallel routes to the line of scrimmage, going from the left to the right, giving Jayden Daniels options there. Cornerback Jordan Lewis is dropping, but he's also aware of the underneath options and of Jayden Daniels' running ability, so he doesn't drop super deep and allows Jayden Daniels just enough space to drop the ball over him, but in front of the Cowboys' deep safety. What's interesting here is before the game during the week, Terry McLaurin talked to us about the importance of a receiver catching and knifing, and essentially catching the ball, turning upfield, and knifing through the coverage, and how a quarterback can kind of tell him by the ball placement, hey, this is the direction you need to knife in. And if you watch that pass, Jayden Daniels leaves the pass inside the field of play, doesn't throw it towards the boundary, actually keeps it into more inside the field of play. Terry McLaurin takes that direction, takes the momentum, is able to get away from that Dallas Cowboys deep defender, and ultimately sprint upfield for what was at the time a very, very exciting touchdown. So we want to keep that type of play in the playbook. I'm sure you're going to see it dialed up again at some point in time. Really good play against a defense that's trying to play really deep coverage, keep everything in front of them, and you kind of take advantage of it by getting an underneath guy, but also with guys downfield to take defenders out of the picture and or block like Noah Brown did for his teammate. Team stash, 3rd down defense. Cowboys were held to 2 for 11 on 3rd downs. 9 of 11 3rd downs were from 5 yards or more. So really good 1st and 2nd down defense, getting the Cowboys in 3rd and long situations. The season average against the Commanders defense for 3rd down conversions is 41.84%, which is ranked 23rd in the league. So not great, but in week 12, they held the Cowboys to just an 18% conversion rate. So much, much better. Player trash. And I'm not saying this player is trash. What I'm saying is we want this performance to go away coming forward in week 13, but we got to go cornerback Benjamin St-Juste, who only played 58% of the snaps in week 12. That's 38 total snaps. Ben Standing of The Athletic noted it's the fewest percentage of snaps that St-Juste have played since his rookie season. What it signals is the potential that when Marshawn Lattimore is available, you're going to have Marshawn Lattimore on one side, Mikey Sanders still on the other, and Noah Igbenogany as your primary slot corner. If that happens, it will leave Quan Martin as the only member of this secondary remaining from last year's roster, starter, I should say, remaining from last year's roster, and it would make Quan Martin and Deron Payne the only remaining starters from last year's defense starting on this defense. Of course, Jonathan Allen would be if he wasn't injured. Play trash. Washington had a 3-and-out drive, their 9th possession of the game. There was a 2nd and 7 play call that gave Jayden Daniels 2 downfield targets, both of them on the same side of the field. I noticed that the Commanders try to do this heavy on one side of the field type of situation quite often, forces a layered throw that goes high intended for Zach Ertz. Now, originally I hated the play call, but honestly, it's not a bad call, not a bad design. It misses to Ertz because Daniel throws the ball upfield while Zach Ertz flattens out. Now, I don't know which one was wrong here because I don't know the play design, but that's a disconnect between the quarterback and the tight end. Either way, Ben Sinnott was also open underneath and had some room to potentially get the first down on 2nd and 7. So even if he's short, you end up with 3rd and 2, something like that. Look, I know the Commanders are getting more aggressive and doing all these things, but what made them successful was Jayden Daniels taking what the defense was going to give them and then forcing them to creep up, hitting them over the top once they crept up, and then using it as well to get out in the run. I want to see a return to that. So it's not the play necessarily itself, because the play design itself was not bad, but just kind of the mentality around that play that I'd like to see change. Team trash, time of possession. We talked about this before the game. The Washington Commanders are dominating in time of possession, 35 minutes and 12 seconds to 24:48 seconds. It's their 6th time losing the time of possession battle this year. 5th loss in those games. The only win came against Chicago Bears, which probably should have lost that game too. The Commanders didn't take a big hit in the playoff standings this weekend, but the NFC East division race may be slipping away. That's next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Commanders is brought to you in part by Hillsdale College. Time is our most precious commodity, so don't waste it scrolling through the same mind-numbing content for hours and hours. How can you spend that time more wisely to improve yourself? Well, you can study. You can study history, economics, the great works of literature, and so much more. Did you study these things in school? Maybe you did. And if you did, maybe it's time for a refresher. If you didn't, maybe it's a topic that interests you and you want to learn about it. Either way, time and technology has not changed a lot of things, but it has changed, or it had, and certainly hasn't changed, the basic fundamental truths of the world and our place in it. So our sponsors, Hillsdale College, is offering more than 40 free courses online, including Constitution 101, the meaning and history of the Constitution, Introduction to Free Market Economics, The Great American Story, A Land of Hope, The Rise and Fall of the Roman Republic, and a brand new documentary-style course on Marxism, socialism, and communism. If you're interested in those types of isms, go to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll today. There's no cost. It's easy to get started. It's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. Hillsdale.edu/lockedon. The Commanders did not take a big hit in the playoff standings following their Week 12 loss to the Dallas Cowboys, but the NFC East division race may be starting to slip away. So in the playoff standings, of course, that's first and foremost. According to playoffstatus.com, the Washington Commanders, after their 3rd straight loss, now have a 59% chance of making the playoffs, which is still not bad, obviously, close to 60%. But when you think about less than a month ago, that number was like 76, 77%, something like that. Certainly has taken a hit overall. Now, the Washington Commanders came into the weekend 7th in the NFC playoff race. They come out of the weekend 7th in the NFC playoff race, the final wild card spot. If the playoffs were to kick off today, they would be visiting the Philadelphia Eagles in the first round of said playoffs. Of course, Philadelphia Eagles are leading the NFC East right now. The Washington Commanders are 2nd place in the NFC East right now, behind the 9-2 Eagles, who beat the Los Angeles Rams this weekend on Sunday Night Football. So not only did the Commanders drop a game, but the Philadelphia Eagles were able to pick up another win. What you really needed was a Commanders win and a Rams upset. And the Rams, look, they held tough against Philadelphia Eagles. And then eventually Saquon Barkley just did Saquon Barkley things. The Commanders are now 2 wins behind Philly, 3 losses behind Philly, which means they have more, 3 more losses, and currently are losing tiebreakers head to head and in the division as well. 3 wins ahead of 3rd place Dallas, 2 losses better than Dallas, 5 wins better than fourth place New York Giants, 4 losses better than the Giants as well. So those two teams are not necessarily close to overtaking the Commanders for second place. Going back to the preseason projections, we talked about this, and right now the Washington Commanders are 1-5 against 2023 NFL playoff teams. They're 1-0 against 2023 teams with winning records that missed the playoffs, and they're 5-0 against 2023 teams that had losing records. So that right there, in a nutshell, kind of tells you where this team is right now. They're undefeated against teams that had losing records last year. They were undefeated in only one shot against winning non-playoff teams, but then they're losing 5 of 6 outings against playoff teams. So it kind of shows you where the team is right now. To get to 7 wins and surpass 6.5 win projection, we projected a potential 2-6 record against last year's playoff teams. They've got 2 games left to get 1 more win. Those games coming up against Philly and Dallas. They've got we projected a 1-1 record against winning record non-playoff teams. They've got 1 left. That's at New Orleans. If they win that, then they go 2-0 and better that projection. If they lose that, then they match that projection at 1-1. And they were projected to need for a 4-3 record against losing record teams. They've already surpassed that with 5 wins, no losses, and they've got 2 games left against Titans and Falcons to try to go a perfect 7-0 in that category. At the time, other than the fans bullishly predicting 13 wins or so, everyone was really happy with the idea that the Washington Commanders would kind of win those types of splits and win 7 games. But with 5 games left, Washington already has 7 wins. And they're still in position to hit or exceed all those marks individually. But because of the context of how they have now gotten these last 3 losses, especially, there is a growing sense of, I don't know if it's negativity or angst or whatever it is. But, look, context matters, right? Preseason, I tell you, hey, here's a path that I can see very easily. The Washington Commanders getting 7 wins. Everybody gets excited. Here we are in November. The team has 7 wins. And certainly when they got the 7 wins, everybody was excited. But now following 3 straight losses to playoff teams from last year, people are starting to get a little bit frustrated. Look, the Eagles play the Ravens this weekend, so certainly a chance for the Eagles to take another loss. The Cowboys play the Giants play the Cowboys, and the Packers, who are 6th place in the NFC ahead of the Washington Commanders right now, play the Dolphins. So you are rooting for the Ravens and the Dolphins, and I don't know, who do you hate more, the Giants or the Cowboys? Probably the Cowboys, and of course the Commanders. You're rooting for the Commanders. The Dolphins and Commanders, if the Dolphins and Commanders win, Washington stays in the 7th seed, but they close the loop, obviously, or close the gap a little bit, obviously, with Green Bay. Would have matching win totals, but would have one more loss than Green Bay at this point in time. A Ravens win on top of a Washington win would draw the Commanders within 1 win of Philly, but would still have a 2-loss disadvantage in the standings heading into their bye week and then their final 4-game stretch. On the next episode of Locked On Commanders, we're going to dive into our first look at the Tennessee Titans. And I'm going to tell you right now, don't sleep on them, because Will Levis has actually been playing some pretty decent ball as of late. In the meantime, if you got questions or comments, all you got to do is text me directly by becoming a Locked On Commanders insider at joinsubtext.com/Locked On Commanders. For your next listen, check out the Locked On NFL podcast in the morning. It's the madman Tyler Rowland of Locked On Titans kicking you off with a double shot of NFL espresso. And then you stop by the barbershop in the afternoon with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. It's the all-new Locked On NFL, and it's twice a day, as always. Thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day, every dayers. Thanks for coming through on a regular basis like you do. Until we speak again, if you're out and about, please be safe, be kind, and I will see you back here next time for another episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.